Hello everybody and welcome back to Fintech Week London. We're here at day 2. We're very exciting. My name is Tyler from the Fintech Times, and right now I'm very happy to be joined by Ronit from Citi. Ronit, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good, thank you. Well, thank you for coming. Are you enjoying day 2 of the event so far?
Yeah, it's actually my first day, but
oh, really?
Yeah.
Day 1.
Day 1, day 2. It's always day 1.
Always day 1.
Always day 1.
Always
day 1.
As, yeah, it's good to see. It's good to see lots of faces and people in person. So
it's great to see people.
Good turnout as well. It's been really good.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get on to our conversation, very exciting. Why don't you give our viewers, if they don't know already, give our viewers a little bit about who you are and where you've come from today.
Sure.
Please.
So I run a team called Future of Finance. It's a thought leadership team. My mandate, I work for Citi, but my mandate is to look at what's happening in money in general and the intersection of money and technology. So very lucky, very happy that Citi basically pay me to navel gaze or horizon scan. I think it's more professional way of saying that. And yeah, we're looking at what's coming over the horizon. We set this team up last year, and our job is to basically be available to advise and talk to any client, any institutional client of the bank, be it a government, a corporate, a bank, a fintech, a family office, and we talk to them about this is what's going on in the industry, whether it's crypto, fintech, traditional banking, and hopefully from that they can make strategic decisions and also investing decisions. So that's what we do.
Fantastic. Yeah. And you're based in London?
I'm actually based in Dubai.
In Dubai,
so
wow.
I used to be based in London until 2016. For many years, I grew up in the UK. But since 2016, I'm based in sunny Dubai, and I've brought the sun with me.
Yes, it's very hot. Although it's very cold in this room, I think. Yeah. But yeah, it's been fantastic. We've been so lucky. If only there was no ceiling in here, wouldn't that be nice? But yeah, hopefully more sun to come. Anyway, we must get on with our interview. It's been very interesting. We've got some very interesting topics. Here at Fintech Week London, we're discussing all of the different dynamic elements of what modern fintech really is. And one of those key points is about the metaverse, which is very exciting. It's a very strange concept in finance and how it could interact with finance. Do you see the metaverse as here today, gone tomorrow, or do you think it's really here to make a long-lasting, permanent change to the industry?
Sure. So we think about the metaverse as the next generation of the internet. So the first generation of the internet was the 1990s, you could say, the desktop computer. The second generation of the internet is the mobile phone, the smartphone. The next generation of the internet is this 3D, persistent, immersive internet that we'll access through a combination of devices. A lot of people think of the metaverse as only VR, or they think about the metaverse as Web3. The metaverse will encompass lots of technologies. The key thing to remember the metaverse is that it's immersive. So we're in it. And we're in it via, it could be VR headsets. It's more likely to be AR goggles, AR glasses. And actually, like we do with gaming today, we do 3D experiences on 2D screens. A lot of people, billions of people will access the metaverse via 2D devices, your phone, your smartphone, or gaming consoles, and we'll access this 3D experience. Now, finance comes into it because we'll need a way to pay, we'll need a way to do credit, and there's actually also a lot of financing off these companies that are going to build in the metaverse. Big companies, small companies. That's the kind of finance or fintech angle, if you like.
So where does Web3 come into that? Can you give us a definition of what Web3 is?
Sure. So a lot of the metaverse, particularly in the early years, so say today through the middle of this decade, will be firmly Web 2, not Web 3. Now Web 3 is going to be small, but grow over time. So it's like a Venn diagram. It's a little bit of an overlap, and the Web 3 circle is tiny compared to the Web 2 circle. But it's going to grow, and then there's an overlap. Now Web 3 is usually defined as, Web 1 was read, Web 2 was read write, Web 3 is read write own. So it's kind of a token based or blockchain based internet. So there'll be an overlap, and particularly for some users and consumers and some developers who want more of a, I should say, an open metaverse, for want of a better word, they'll gravitate towards Web3. Also, regulators will be very concerned about monopolies. Web2 already has monopolies or oligopolies. So Web2 has all this concentration, and it's likely that the metaverse will replicate this concentration, this kind of quasi-monopoly that we have in the current internet. We'll have that in the metaverse, and policymakers, regulators will say, whoa, we need interoperability. We need fewer walled gardens. And one way to have interoperability is blockchain, is Web3. So both some users, some developers, but also actually policymakers will push us towards a Web3 future. But for the foreseeable future, this decade, Web2 is going to be way bigger than Web3, albeit the relative sizes are going to become more equal over time. But still, Web2 is bigger. So metaverse is not Web3, but Web3 is a subset of the metaverse.
So you described it as still sort of in its development stage.
Yeah.
But even now, do you see it bringing major benefits to the consumer?
Metaverse?
The Web3, sorry.
Oh, Web3, yeah. So the benefit of Web3 is this ability to say, I have ownership. And it doesn't have to be the metaverse, it can be just the 2D internet we have. So there'll be a lot of Web3 that'll be 2D rather than 3D, non-immersive. The benefit of Web3 is I have a stake, an ownership stake, and I can port that into other domains. Most of us, when we're using the internet, probably don't care about ownership per se, particularly when it comes to things like gaming or entertainment. And so this is the challenge that Web3 is working on right now, which is most of the time, if you're playing a game, you want it to be a fun game. You want it to be an enthralling, immersive game, or whatever it is we're doing online. And so sometimes the challenge is that this is kind of horse and buggy or horse and cart problem. I feel like the ownership bit is the cart, and the fun bit or the use case is the horse, and we're putting the cart in front of the horse. So if you get the analogy, and so I think that's what the Web3 guys and gals are trying to work out. Well, mainly guys. That's the other thing they've got to work out. There's a bit of a diversity issue. That's another thing they've got to work out. Yeah.
It's very interesting while it's being developed, and I think that it's a space, as you've underlined so well, is that it's going to develop, and sort of it's in the process of defining itself, which is very, very interesting. But just drawing back to the metaverse, we've seen in recent months that it hasn't been particularly the best time to own any crypto, just due to the market crash. Do you see the volatility of crypto having a major impact on the metaverse? And if so, what impact will that be?
Yeah. Short answer is not really. So the volatility of crypto has a big impact on the short-term sentiment towards digital assets and crypto. And it's obviously had, for some people, a major financial loss, and regulators and policymakers will be working on how to put guardrails and rules around this in the future. But the bigger challenge for the metaverse isn't crypto. The challenge for the metaverse is creating experiences and use cases that are fun, that are useful. Some of the use cases that hopefully will be useful over time in the metaverse will be education. Imagine, kids who are, I used to be bored in my science classes, sitting there at the Bunsen burner or whatever, or listening to some lecture. But can you imagine being transported to the creation of the universe 13.8 billion years ago, or the sun, our sun, or the planets, in class with your VR headset on? Or you do a history tour, you go around and you're going to see Westminster Abbey or something, or go around St. Paul's Cathedral with your AR glasses on, and you're getting the kind of, explanation of what you're seeing real time. That'd be awesome. So the kind of good use cases, whether it's educational, whether it's fun, social, that's the thing. And we're going to be building, the industry is going to be building that in the next 2, 3, 4 years. We're in this difficult period right now where we don't have enough devices. The VR headsets aren't owned by that many people. I have one, don't really use it very often. We need more AR, VR, and 2D devices that allow us to see 3D. And I think pretty sure it's this holiday season coming up between Thanksgiving and Chinese New Year, the end of this year, early next year, or the year after. In that kind of 12, 18-month period, you're going to see much broader adoption. Some of the big tech companies are going to be rolling out their devices, and as you get more users, more content will get created. At the moment, we don't have enough content. So more content will lead to more users. More users will lead to more content. There'll be this kind of dance going on. And then all of us in fintech or financial services or banks will be like, oh, that's growing. How do we do payments in that space? Is it credit cards? Is it tokens? Is it crypto? And that'll grow naturally just because that virtual economy will grow. One of the ways to think about it, and one of my colleagues came up with this kind of concept, was we can think about the metaverse as a new emerging market. It's just like, we're like, oh, look, there's this big country called China. We've never done any business there. It was like 20 years ago or whatever. Or then India or Brazil. And that's like, you could say that, except it's like another world. And it could be really big. Just like the internet is huge. And most of us spend many, many hours already in the internet. Now imagine doing that in 3D. That could be cool.
It is very cool. But I just want to go back to something that you mentioned there about the headsets. Is that it is sort of the main entry point into the metaverse. But one problem with these headsets is that are they comfortable to wear in long periods? They're quite pricey for the average consumer, I guess. If you were to have them across maybe a classroom, for example, there is that sort of cost there. And what it sort of reminds me of, though, it's quite different. Is do you remember when Google did the Google Glass? So I'm just wondering, how can, and you touched on this a bit before in your answer, but how can the metaverse be made accessible to all?
So if I can take that in two parts. The first one, as a definitional point, I don't agree that the metaverse is about VR headsets. And that's a really important point. We said in the big report we published earlier this year that there'd be about 250 million users of VR headsets by the end of this decade. And we said there'll be 5 billion metaverse users. So most people will access the metaverse through AR, because that point you mentioned about weight. And look, if you wear a VR headset on for too long, well, first of all, walking down the road, you're going to look a bit stupid. And you probably go bang into things. So you're sitting at home on your sofa, your spouse or your partner is after half an hour going to shout at you. Like, it's bad enough when you're staring at your phone, but can you imagine wearing your headset in your home? Someone's going to get annoyed with you, particularly if they haven't got their headset on. So we think AR is going to be much bigger, or mixed reality. So that's point number one. The point number two, I totally agree with you, the digital divide problem. That's going to be huge. I don't think the VR headset, the ones we have now, that expensive. £250. I mean, it's not cheap, but I mean, it's people spend that on trainers, right?
Exactly.
And on phones, like people spend 4x that on phones. So the issue isn't the current VR headsets being expensive. The issue is the next generation of AR headsets, or AR goggles, could be way more. We don't know yet, but they could be way more expensive. They could be like smartphones, but more expensive. And there'll be a certain segment of the population in all countries, including the UK, that would have access to that. So it's the bottom 25%. But there's going to be a digital divide problem. And this is where schools, particularly the state sector, it's super important that whoever's, whether it's the current government or some future government or what, whoever's running the education department, they need to have a school's metaverse strategy. They need to, it's like computers. When home computers first arrived, in the 1980s in the UK, some of us had computers. 1990s it grew. but it was not the whole population. Sweden at the time in the 1990s made it really easy, as a government policy, for everyone in Sweden to have access to computers at home. Now, the way to do that for the kids is to put that into schools. So basically, have it as part of the curriculum, have it as certain lessons in history and science, in whatever subject, will be taught in AR or VR. And if the schools don't do it as a national education policy, what will happen is that the middle class kids or the richer kids will have that at home or in their better funded schools. Yeah. And there's going to be a digital divide. And my fear is that a lot of older policymakers will not see this as important until it's like too late. Yeah. This also play out internationally in poorer countries where it won't just be the device cost, it'll also be bandwidth. Yeah. There won't be the bandwidth in many countries in Africa or in South Asia to basically support this huge amount of data that's going to go. So again, for middle class in London or Singapore or Dubai, where I'm based, brilliant. You can access this, but if you're...
In that way, it almost becomes exclusive in a way, in that sort of projection, in the fact that it has this sort of monetary and the infrastructure. Yeah. It balances on that. Yeah. So do you see it as one of the main priorities of regulators is to really identify this digital divide? Yeah. Do you think it's up to them to make the difference?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's exclusive. I think the top, at a global level, it'll be more than half the population by the end of this decade will have access to either a metaverse or proto-metaverse. In our report, we talked about 5 billion users of the metaverse by 2030, of which 1 billion would be through AR and VR, and 4 billion would be through phones and gaming consoles. Yeah. So by definition, if you said 5 billion, there's another, 3 or 4 billion that don't have access to it. So it's not like it's a minority pursuit. And in the UK, those numbers, or the ratio would be even higher. So you're talking about, in the UK, probably 3/4 plus have access. It's the bottom quartile. But from an inclusion perspective, particularly from an education perspective, that's really, really important that you capture that, through the school system, you give them the access. Because also just learning will be more fun. And if you make learning more fun, hopefully they'll have more interest in whatever it is they're studying, and you're going to end up with, and we already do, kids today are way better and smarter, better educated and smarter than 50 years ago. Yeah. But if you want to actually carry on in terms of increasing knowledge and increasing creativity, give them the tools. So it's not a regulatory question, it's more of a policy question at a kind of almost a government level. The regulatory question is more about openness and walled gardens, in that as we move into a metaverse, be it Web 2 or other, are we going to have these metaverses controlled by one or two companies? And those companies will be typically American or sometimes Asian, and they'll have way more data about us than they do already today. They have all the data now, but then in the future they'll also have biological data. They'll have psychological data because they'll have us in 3D. They'll be able to see through our physical movements, through our pupils dilating, our body movements, and through the combination of the, whatever it is, AR, VR headset and our the handsets, they'll be able to see, like, when we feel fear, when we feel pain or hunger. There's so much more data on us. Are we going to live in a...
it's quite concerning.
It could be quite dystopian.
Yeah.
So that's where the regulator comes in.
Yeah, it does sound like that. It's it's a very good point that you've mentioned in the sort of in terms of what they're collecting.
Yeah, they'll have everything on us. We'll need like a GDPR plus.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Yeah. Ronit, I would love to speak to you all day, and I really could, but this has been a fascinating interview about the metaverse. Thank you so much for joining us
Thanks
today.
for having me.
And I hope you enjoy day 2 / your first day of Fintech Week London.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.